Hey robot fans, welcome back to the build. This is it, the last build video. Let's make this pauldron and finish this build once and for all. Ah, pauldrons. This ornamental shoulder structure is the mark of a commander, and one of the main things that drew me to clone commanders when I was deciding on my build. So here is my pauldron kit from Dino over at Sanitized Creations. He's the same guy who made my helmet, the belt portion of my belt, and some of my strapping stuff. This is the unassembled version, as you can see. It comes in pieces, it's not painted, and the big part's not really bent. You can also get a full assembled piece from Dino. I went with the unassembled version, and in the end I'm kind of glad I did because there's going to be some changes that I want to make. Overall, I really like this kit. There's a lot of parts that I really like this part here, this vinyl neck seal part. It's really light and airy, and it forms really well around your neck. Also, there is these thin pads going all around the chest and the wings, and for these particular ones on the side here, these curved ones that go across your shoulder, I think these are great because they're bendable, they move, and they hold the shape in this soft vinyl part, which is really nice. Now the same pads are used as the decorative padding on the pauldron wings and the main structure. I think that these are a little bit too thin for my liking. I'm going to make them probably about twice as thick. I'm going to bevel the edges a little bit and add a better texture to the front here. That's going to be my main modification for the pauldron. And then this is going to get bent to its proper shape and have the 3 or 4, I guess, bigger pads on there. So we need to make new pads. I'm going to 3D print these pads, obviously, but first I need to make myself some kind of template. To do that, I'll need to get my big piece bent into shape. I clamped down a piece of 2020 aluminum extrusion to the edge of my table to act as my, my bending rod, I guess, and I lined up the corners of the pauldron where the divide is and began to heat the panel very slowly until it budged a little bit. After it budged, I continued heating it until I noticed it starting to sag back down. At that point, I grabbed it and aligned it to an eyeballed 45-degree angle and held it in place until it was a bit cooler. I repeated the same steps on the back, and bam, just like that, we have a nice bent piece of pauldron. There's a lot of different places to pull reference from for the pauldron. Gentle giant figures, my little tiny action figure of Commander Bao, the comic books, but the one reference we really care about, the movies, leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of a good, solid reference image. The raw Dino Sanitized Creations kit here looks a lot like what you see in the movies, which is great, but it's tough to pull accurate thicknesses or see the definite shape of the pauldron in certain parts just from the screen grab. Enter Battlefront 2. Here we have a beautiful close-up look of a really awesome looking clone pauldron. Problem solved, right? Well, not really. Without diving super far into this, let's just say that there are enough parts of the Battlefront clones that differ from the movie clones to make them not the best source for any kind of movie-accurate clone build. However, the pauldron is pretty awesome, and I think I can pull some cool details from it that can neither be confirmed nor denied from the movie screen caps. Starting with these corners, all of the hardest edges have a transitional chamfer between them. I'm definitely going to incorporate that into my pauldron because it softens the look a little bit, which I like. There's also a pretty rough texture to everything. Big Baby Props just made a Battlefront-inspired pauldron in one of his videos where he used a truck bed sealer to get that texture of the pauldron. I think that's a really good idea. I'm probably going to do the same thing, but first I need to get all of this set up and ready for paint. The first thing I did was trace out an inset shape on each of the panels of the big wing. This will represent the outer extent of the pads. At that point, I legit just stuck my sketched pauldron onto my scanner and scanned in some one-to-one PDFs that I was able to trace out in Adobe Illustrator and then bring into 3D Studio Max to extrude and edit. I did some beveling of the overall shape and some additional chamfering of all of the edges to give it a nice rounder look. Then I hacked off the corners to create the chamfered edge that I wanted to and made sure my inset padding followed that edge. I printed out those 4 panels, and for gluing them it was as simple as lining them up with the pencil marks that inspired them. I used some CA glue and clamps to get them into their final spots. I did my usual sanding and finishing work on both wings and left them in a slightly rough primer stage. Now it's time to add in the texture. I picked up this Duplicolor truck bed sealer and sprayed both wings with it. This stuff is very similar to the rubber sealant I've used in projects before, like my chopper tire. It comes out really fast and it's best to spray it from a bit of a distance. I sprayed each wing down with about 2 coats and I got a really nice result. I really like the textured look from the truck bed sealer. It also covers super thick, which is awesome. We're not quite done with the big wing yet though. The pads on this side need to be the same 501st blue as the rest of my armor, so I masked off all of the non-pad parts with some standard blue painter's tape and sprayed it with my usual Krylon Global Blue. The paint didn't fill in the texture lines too much, which is awesome, so now we have our textured colored pads on our bigger wing. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about everything. I think it looks really good, but I can't help this nagging question in the back of my head. Did all of this stuff make this unapprovable? So I decided to talk to the powers that be, the ones that make the decisions. I sent this picture over to my local GML, and sure enough, it is denied. It turns out that Battlefront 2 is not an acceptable source, and these chamfered edges are not going to fly. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here since we just went through all of this, but I used a heat gun to re-flatten out both of the wings. The angles on this thing are pretty tricky, so I thought the best thing to do would be to trace out the old ones. The main complaint from the GML was the beveled corners, so I need to make those pointy again. But in addition to that, I'm also going to flatten out my pads a little bit when I reprint them just to be safe. After that, it's really just repeating the previous steps, gluing the panels on, spraying it down, and painting it with blue. With my confidence in this one restored a little bit, I took it one step further and did some preliminary weathering as well. So despite that hiccup, we are now back on track. Now we need to attach these 2 wings to the main piece, and to do that we're going to use our trusty supply of Velcro. I'm going to glue 3 Velcro strips to each side of the pauldron with some extra big and juicy ones for the big wing. This does a great job of holding them in place and lets us do our first real test fit, which reveals a bit of a weight balance issue. No big deal here, I needed to mount these down to the armor anyway, so now I will just make sure that the mount allows for some rebalancing. So I'm adding some additional Velcro strips to the inside of the pauldron and matching Velcro pads to the inside of the chest and back armor. These will just connect with an elastic strap with Velcro on either end and hopefully give us a nice secure hold. It's hard to notice here on camera, but the white underside of the pauldron is really bothering me when I'm looking at this from the side, so before I reassemble everything, I'm going to give the bottom of the pauldron a hit with this Duplicolor vinyl and fabric paint. Nothing crazy, I don't need it to be jet black here or anything, just not noticeably white. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to do a light coat on the top, just to add some color variation to the panels, which we will further accentuate later with the weathering. With the chest armor on now and the pauldron secured with the Velcro straps, we can see that we are finally in good order here. That was way more of a process than I thought it was going to be, but here we are. So I know it's hard to see, but there's 2 straps in here that are holding the pauldron down to the chest armor in the front and the back armor in the back. And what's that doing is pulling down this side of the pauldron so that the big weight of the big wing here isn't pulling it down like this. It's kind of counterbalancing that and holding it in the center position of my chest. The last bit of business for this pauldron is the bandolier, which features 3 ammo boxes. It connects at the top to the neckline of the pauldron and at the bottom to the back of the 3rd belt box. I 3D printed the ammo boxes with a recess for the strap and some convenient little holes to attach them. I did my typical sanding and finishing process for those. Take a look back at previous videos for what that whole process is about. The paint configuration is 2 white boxes and 1 black box, and the order is white, black, white. Once that was done, I went ahead and did my full weathering of the boxes before attaching them. For the strap itself, I'm using a 1.5-inch black leather belt that I found on Amazon. To help align the boxes, I printed a little box aligner piece which has the same holes in it as the back of the real box. Leaving ample belt length on each side of the boxes, I marked out the holes onto the belt and used an awl, this word should not exist, but I used this to punch the holes into the belt. I sanded down the leather a bit where the box is going to land and used some E6000 glue to tack it into place. In the end, this glue was actually great. It held up enough and I never even used the screw holes on the back, but they are always there just in case this glue decides to fail. I repeated this for the other 2 boxes, allowing 1 inch of space between the boxes. To attach it to the pauldron, I clamped it into place with the middle of the first white box aligned to the bottom edge of the pauldron and the outer edge of the strap aligned between the two corners of the first set of pads. So if we take a look at this and we draw a line from the top inner edge of this little pad to the bottom outer edge of the center pad, that's the line that I went with for aligning the leather strap. I always try to use landmarks on the costume itself to align things whenever possible, and these 2 points seem to give me the best angle and position that match the CRL. To secure the strap to the pauldron, I used E6000 glue on the pad portion and a bit of CA glue on the vinyl portion. This seems to hold really nicely. There's also the option to put a screw through the pad and into the back of the white box for extra support, but we'll see how well all of this holds as is. I let that dry overnight, and then carefully as I could, I cut out the neckline at the top of the strap. Once again, partially suited up now, I marked out where that strap will hit the back of the third belt box. For this portion, I'm going to attach some Velcro to the back of the belt box with some glue, and then sew a matching strip of Velcro to the bottom of the belt. I think that's it, folks. I think that's the last build piece needed for approval into the 501st Legion. Can you believe it? So if we can just get L3 to play us some sweet, sweet Banjo Imperial March, we can do our CRL suit up. This feels so great for so many reasons, mostly because I've finally made it to this point. Secondly, because it feels really cool to be wearing an actual clone costume, and thirdly, because it still fits despite my quarantine gut. As far as CRL submission, I got in touch with my local GML and asked what he needed from me for the approval process, and that list is as follows. A picture from all 4 sides in full costume, check. 1 helmetless picture, check. 1 action shot, check. A close-up picture of all 4 sides of my helmet, check. Close-up shots of all detail spots. I think I probably overdid this section a bit, but hey, I got nothing to hide. And lastly, a list of all the vendors I purchased parts from. That's pretty easy. I eagerly submitted all of this to the Legion, and at this point, it's just a waiting game. And then, it happened. Approved. Approved! I am officially a member of the 501st Legion. What a freaking journey, right? Well, guess what? We're not done yet. Yes, this was the last build video to get my 501st approval, but there is still plenty more cloning around to do. Commander Bao here needs some pistols, so we're definitely going to tackle that next. I still have that functional compad project that I started last year. That's going to help control all the electronics in my helmet, which also need to be redone. And of course, I'm going to be using this armor to build not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 other approvable clones and maybe a 5th non-approvable clone. So stay tuned for all of that too. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you to everyone who followed this build series from the beginning and all of you who found it along the way. A big thank you to all of those who helped me along the way, my local garrison members Sean, Taylor, Albert, Sebastian, and Joe. My not-so-local guys Dino from Sanitized Creations over in Germany and David out in Denmark. But most importantly, a huge thank you to Gats, who guided me through all of this. He will always be my clone commander, but now he is officially my clone brother. Thank you so much, Gats. Alright, I hope you're ready for the one true progression shot to take us out. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.